Well, hello, friends. My name is Chris, and what you heard just barely is a small part of the recording of the Dance Macabre. And I will be your guide today as we take a dive into one of the great symphonic poems of the Romantic period, the Dance Macabre. The French composer Camille Saint-Saëns was well known for his composition of the Dance Macabre, or the Dance of the Dead. This piece, written in the Romantic period, 1874, is famous for the story told that originates from an old French superstition. This poem tells of Death going about with his violin, waking the dead on the night of Halloween. In this piece, they have the dance of the century as they celebrate life and, more importantly, death. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss the origins of this symphonic poem, the characters in this beautifully portrayed story, the inspiration for this piece, the form and key in which it is written, and an overview analysis for the whole piece. Camille Saint-Saëns was born in Paris, France in 1835. As we have previously discussed, he composed this piece during the Romantic period, and the direct translation of the piece means the Dance of the Dead. He drew inspiration from the old French superstition, along with poems and other pieces written concerning the dead rising and making their dance on the night of All Hallows Eve. He also had real-life experiences that spurred the construction of this masterpiece. To give a bit of background, Saint-Saëns and his wife Marie Tuffet had 2 children, both whom died within 6 weeks of each other. One of these children tragically fell from a 4-story building and was killed. These tragedies were later followed by a divorce, which left Camille Saint-Saëns with nothing. During this dark time in his life, he drew from his sorrow and composed the great and legendary Dance Macabre. We also may look at the Romantic time period of the 1800s. The Black Plague was all over Europe, and death was a regular part of these people's lives. It has been said that Dance Macabre is a true medieval allegory of the universality of death. Dance Macabre is a symphonic poem that tells of an old French superstition. The piece in the setting originates from a very popular poem written by Henry Cazalis. The direct translation of this poem goes, "Zig, zig, zig, death in a cadence, striking with his heel a tune. Death at midnight plays a dance tune, zig, 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 on his violin. The winter wind blows, and the night is dark. Moans are heard in the linden trees. Through the gloom white skeletons pass, running and leaping in their shrouds. Zig, 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 each one is frisking. The bones of the dancers are heard to crack. But hist of a sudden they quit the round. They push forward, they fly. The cock has crowed." When Saint-Saëns composed Dance Macabre, he originally wrote it for a vocal and piano arrangement in 1874. He later adapted it to a full-piece orchestra. The most common recording of the piece that we have access to today was played and recorded by the National Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Leopold Stokowski. This is the recording that I'll be referring back to today. So this poem tells of a gruesome character depicted as Death, who awakens a graveyard of skeletons with the sound of his fiddle. Some interesting idioms of this piece are the tuning of the main voice, or the violin. The top string was tuned to create a tritone, which is commonly known as the devil of music. Saint-Saëns has a clever use of different instruments to bring this story to life. At the very start of the piece, 12 distinct plucks of the harp tell us the time is now midnight, and the dead are ready for their dance. As I play this phrase, let us listen for the number of plucks by the harp. Well, if you could hear it, it was pretty quiet, but there were definitely small, faint plucks of the harp string, which tell us that there were 12 to be exact, and that tells us that it's midnight. So, from the origins of the poem, the skeleton and death have instruments to carry their infamous dance. Saint Saëns uses the xylophone as the sound of the rattling of the skeleton's bones. The violins play the following phrase. As we look through this, this depicts Death being the leader of the dance and the skeletons following his lead. So there we hear the violin playing that melody that we've heard previously at the beginning of this presentation, and we heard the xylophone repeating the same melody played by the violin. As we look at the key of this piece, it was written in G minor, but transitions around E flat throughout the piece. The form, as we look at this slide, we are in the A section, and there's an 8-bar A section followed by a repeat of an 8-bar phrase. This is all the A section, but the second 8 bars of the 16-bar section is brought up 1 octave and quietly played on the flute. The melody, as we know, is initially played on the flute and then repeated by the violin and the whole orchestra. This time of the piece, the second half of... let's listen to it. So that's that phrase, the first A section, that is pretty much repeated throughout the entirety of the whole piece. Then the next section is where the dynamic is brought down quite a bit for another 16 bars, and this is a long legato violin solo. In between each transition section, there's a loud violin break signaling the changing modes of the piece. So let's listen to that section. So we'll hear that violin section. This is the quiet spot. And now we repeat the same melody, but by the whole orchestra this time. Here's the B section, repeated by the whole orchestra. So now we know this is pretty much the whole form of the whole piece. It has an A and a B section that is just repeated back and forth continuously throughout the whole piece. The only changes that really occur are dynamically and by instrumentation, but it is the same old melody that we know and love. Often you'll hear people referring to the Danse Macabre when they hear something similar to this, because it's such a memorable melody. And now, by the end of the dance, the violin has now joined with the rest of the orchestra, and a cello carries the piece to a strong crescendo in the sudden pause, when the oboe plays a small solo signifying the cock's crow to end their dance. The strong 3/4 feel brings the dance of death to life. So let us listen to that, the last section of this piece. So we hear that part. We hear the oboe, the da 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 da, signifying the beginning of the day, and the rest of the piece has a nice soft closing, fading away as the dead return to their graves and death returns back to the next Hallows Eve when he will come back for the dance. So let's listen to his little solo. Oh, what a beautiful piece. And my wife's mocking me. So there's the cock smiling, the cock crowing and smiling at us at the close of this piece. So let's review the piece a little bit. What really pushes this piece forward is the eighth notes. The dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum. The repeated figures has a nice call and response between the violin, xylophone, and the rest of the orchestra. We also recognize this as theme and variation. What makes this piece so well known and loved is the repetition of the beautiful melody played by the violin, woodwinds, and xylophone. Many composers have attempted to create the same sound and feel for their pieces. Something that separates this legendary piece is the story that is told. Not very often do you find a piece that brings you on such a magnificent journey as you do with Danse Macabre. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn a lot about our author, his inspiration, and his work. Thank you for watching, and happy listening.